afternoon, everyone. My name is Jennifer McCrae Rincon, and I'm the founding artistic director of Vision Box Studio. And really happy to be here today with some colleagues on stage. I'm kind of directing some of the questioning and answering, but this is going to be a very informal discussion and conversation. And at the end, we're going to set aside about 15 minutes for you all to ask us questions or make comments however you like. If you've never heard of Vision Box, we are a professional actor training program and new play development company founded in 2010 by myself and actor Bill Pullman and another incredible colleague who's not here today. He's in LA, but he is always with us in spirit. And one of the things that we will talk about today is why are we in theater? Why did we all go into this for our lives? And I would say one of the answers to that question is it's the relationships. And when you go into a rehearsal studio, even if you're 15 years old, whenever it happened, something happens not just between us and the audience, but between us and each other that usually lasts a lifetime. It's also why I tell everyone don't burn any bridges, but because you never know. But these three people on stage are extraordinary artists, and they're also incredible friends. And I want to thank them for being here. They're doing all this out of the kindness of their hearts, and because they care about this question, why does theater matter to us today? And we're going to get into that, but I'm going to introduce them first. Alexander Watson on the end there got here in 2021, came here from Chicago, kind of post-COVID, and is an incredible singer. And I've heard him sing, blew my mind. And he's also an actor and a director, and he was my assistant for a couple of years and has then become our associate artistic director. He's the lead on one of our big projects this year. We develop new plays is the other thing we do, and he's spearheading a project called the Queer Theater Project that we're going to be starting in the next month or two and going through 2025, and he may talk about some of that today. But I thank you for being here, Alexander, and he'll have a lot to say, and hopefully surprise me too. And next to him is another incredible colleague of mine, Dwayne Carrington. Many of you might know him if you're from this neck of the woods. Dwayne has been here since 1979. He went to DU. He has a long story about that and about the graduate school and why he kind of shifted from theater into something else that may come up. But Dwayne has been an actor in this community for a really long time. I met him through a brilliant actor named Harvey Blanks, who was at the DCPA when I got here in 1991, and introduced me to Dwayne. Dwayne was a founding member of Shadow Theater with Jeffrey Nicholson, if you've heard of that company. Jeffrey's no longer with us. He was one of my students at DCPA, but he started this incredible company where Vintage is now. Also the Eulipians, so many other great theaters. Miners Alley, you've been at a lot lately. I've seen him in a couple of shows. They're incredible. But the thing I want to say about Dwayne is that he's part of why I keep doing what I do, which is I'm a director by profession, but I'm also I train actors. And I came from Yale Drama School to the DCPA to be head of the graduate school there, which no longer exists. We started this company to provide that same level of training to all the artists that are interested in it in Colorado. And Dwayne came very early on and took class and didn't leave. I mean, he goes off and does shows, but he has said something to all our students and our professional actors every year, which really touches me and I care about. He says, all roads lead home, and that Vision Box is your home. And he's really provided that home base for our artists. And there's no ego in this. I mean, actors at whatever age level background, we keep studying, we keep learning, we keep practicing a practice. And so Dwayne, I just keep seeing him get better and better. So there is no such thing as just, I'm great, that's where I am, and that's where I stay. great actors keep getting better and better, and some of them will come back to class. Also, Dwayne has been head of our ensemble now since we founded the company, and thank you for being here today. Thank you for being my friend. He directed me in a play. I had not done a play since 1977, probably, and I was the lead in a play he found for me called The Piano Teacher at Vintage, and it was an incredible experience. Now, I had to talk for 85 minutes, and it was very hard to learn all the lines, but I got to talk a lot, which, people tell me I need to be careful of that. But, and I will be careful. I've gotten a lot of notes today already. Just don't talk too much, Jennifer. Okay, so we're gonna have someone Drake, my assistant at the back, is gonna go like that when I talk too much. Okay, and next to Dwayne is an amazing actor that I'm sure most of you have seen before. We met in college, and just a few years ago, right? Yeah. And we studied with the same incredible director and teacher, a man named Nikos Sakaropoulos. And he gave both me and David really our starts in professional theater at the Williamstown Theater Festival. And after college, I'm a year older than him, but we both went to New York, and we both did a whole lot of different things, and then we went in very different directions, and we'll talk a little bit about that today. But I contacted David when I was thinking about this conversation, and that's the other thing. We went to college together, and we've hung out the last 24 hours, and I feel like I've known him all my life. And that is, again, what happens when you train together, when you rehearse together, when you do this work together. There is a common bond that we hope to share with all of you tonight. And I am incredibly grateful for him coming here today. You may or may not know his background. We've given bios for everyone, but David went from Yale undergrad to New York. One of his first big productions was Beyond Therapy by Christopher Durang, brilliant Yale playwright, who recently passed away, but an incredible playwright, one of the top American playwrights. And David was in that production on Broadway and kind of never looked back. He spent about 11 years, was it about, in New York theater. And then most of you will know he went to LA, and then many of you will know him as Niles Crane in Frasier, and an incredible show, an incredible actor in that show, and did that for another 11 years, right? 11 seasons. Yeah. And then, but since then, has done a really lot of theater again. And what you may not know, he's back in New York a lot now, is that David also is a singer. And one of the last big musicals you did was the Sondheim final musical called
Here We Are.
Here We Are. Yeah. And David also did Monty Python, Spamalot. Some of you may have seen him in that. And he will be doing, there's a big revival, and he may talk about it, of Pirates of Penzance that is coming to Broadway next spring. He's starting rehearsals in February. So we grabbed him for a day, and he's here to share his experience, his strengths, his ideas with all of you, and we're gonna just all talk together. So I'm gonna be the one kind of asking the questions, and I will answer them less than the other people. Okay, but, and we do not have notes. I am holding this phone for a couple reasons. One is, if for everyone who has one of these, I'm sure none of you do, but the few of you that have these, please turn them off. So I'm turning mine off, and also because I'm keeping an eye on the time. But the first question that I want to ask these amazing men on stage is, why are you an actor? How did that happen? Go,
yeah.
Alexander.
Happy to start. You know, I was, like many, pushed into quite a few sports growing up, and none of them really stuck. I played tackle football 5th through 8th grade, trained going into high school, did all the summer training, and was told during that time, oh, you know, you should actually go out for the musical. And I was like, well, sure. It might be able to get me out of some of this football time because they have to share you between rehearsals and practice. And, you know, apparently, you know, a lot of freshmen didn't really get in the musical their first time around. And I got in, and it was the perfect excuse to quit football. And I ended up really just kind of falling in love with it. I got bit by the bug, as a lot of us kind of say, and did it all through high school, came to my parents around junior-ish year and said, I want to go get a degree in musical theater. And they said, okay. And were very supportive of it. And following my passions, went to Western Illinois University, got my BFA in musical theater, and have been working in the industry ever since in various capacities. So for me, I think, it was a way, what I didn't really know then of why the musical was calling me so much more than football, was this way to find this extra piece of myself that I had kind of buried. And it was able to be unearthed when I was on stage, this feeling of empowerment that I hadn't really felt in my life before, that, I felt strong and I could be exactly who I was, or, put myself into a character. And, being able to look back later at that now, I said, as a closeted kid from Iowa, it was a refuge and a safe place for me that was really meaningful. And, I wanted just to keep that feeling going. And specifically then, as an audience member too, I knew what it made me feel, and I knew the conversations that it allowed me to have with people coming out of, what did you think of that? What did that mean? And I think that's really important for community, is just to share ideas and create bonds. And I think that happens on this side of the stage, but that also happens on the other. And I just don't know another medium like that that really does it for me. So yeah, that's what drew me in.
Thank you. And Dwayne, what does that make you think about?
Well, I think that theater for me has been my calling. And what that means for me is that it's been the most consistent thing that I've done throughout my life. I remember very early age, I remember the movie. I don't remember the name of the movie, but it was with Sidney Poitier and Tony Curtis, and they were like prisoners, and they were joined together, and they had escaped, and they were going through this whole journey of being together, and it was this big thing. And I saw that sitting there with my mom, and I said, that's what I want to be. I want to be an actor. And my mom said, oh, that's nice, baby. And so from wanting to be that to going to being an artist, I was a visual artist, like serious artist, where my mom would put food at my door and I would pull it in, and I was sharing a bedroom, so I don't know what that situation was like, but I went from that to being, still being an actor. I never was really a part of the Little League sports types of things, but my mom knew that I was a very busy kind of kid, and I had to be kept, busy, that she had to have me doing things, because if I didn't do things, then I would do things. So she's like, I'll keep him busy and keep him occupied and things like that. And so she would I was in a boys' choir from I think 4th grade to 6th grade. That was another one of those things. But one of those things I was always doing was theater. There was always some sort of a theater thing going on with me, and she had me doing things, either stuff at my church or whatever. There was just something going on in the arts that she knew she had to keep me busy. And then finally, I got an opportunity to audition for a play at a university, and I grew up in Ogden, Utah, by the way. And there's a college there called, at the time that I went there, it was called Weber State College. It's now Weber State University. And they were calling for actors, specifically for people of color, because they were doing Finian's Rainbow. And they needed to have African-American performers come in to cast them in. And so my mom went, and she carried me along because they wanted to have singers, and she was a singer. And so I auditioned, and the director loved me, and he cast me in this role called Henry. And he's a little kid that was running around and whatever he did, and I was just being me. And he was like, yeah, go over there and do so and so and so, and I'd go over there and do so and so and so. And he says, and say this line, I'd say this line, and whatever. And that's what my hook was. And at that point in time, that particular director happened to be the artistic director of the department. And so he kind of just took me under his wing. And that became my little league, was theater. And I would go to summer stock every year from the time that he took me under his wing, which was probably around 10 or 12 years old, to the time that he says, you're coming to here and I'm going to give you a 4-year scholarship and you don't have to worry about it. And so I graduated from there with a 4-year degree, but every summer my mother would drop me off at 10 in the morning and she would pick me up at 10 at night. Because she would just drop me off on the campus at the drama department and she knew I was going to be fine and I was going to be preoccupied and I wasn't in trouble. And through that situation, that's where I was able to build sets and go to the costume department and learn how to deal with the box office and learn how to do all these things in the theater because I was just absorbing it all, and the department head was like, okay, as long as you don't do weird things, you're fine. Just go do what you do. So that's what I did, and that's what kind of brought me forward into that, into this calling that I do. And so, you know, I've come to Denver and went to DU, and she said there was a long story about it. I will not get into it, but I came in basically with the desire of having an MA in theater and ended up having an MA in public communications. I'll just leave it like that. Yeah. And then stayed and just did shows and worked with people and had opportunity to work with some very, very fine artists and created Eulipians Theater, which is kind of a interesting situation because now I'm assistant director for Black Nativity, which is being done at the Vintage Theater with the director who was my mentor starting with Eulipians Theater, so it's kind of a full circle situation. I brought her out of retirement to go and do this role. Oh, wow. And she says, I'll only do it if you're my AD. And I says, okay. So it's full circle once again. And Shadow Theater, another one, which was one of the few Black theaters in Colorado. And it's we're no longer functioning, but the Vintage took over our space after Jeffrey passed away. So I've just been around. It's interesting, I saw someone in here, they walked in and says, yeah, we knew each other 10 years ago when we were doing XYZ and ABC. And it's like, well, I guess I'm at that age. Where people knew me 10 years ago or 5 years ago or 20 years ago. So it's been a journey, it's been a calling, it's still a calling. I still train. A quick tidbit as to why I train. Had an opportunity to work with an actor by the name of E.G. Marshall. Some of you may know him, some of you may not. He was very well soap opera, did a lot of television, and I did a training film here, IBM training film, where he was the star of it. Basically, he was the head, he was the lead. So we were talking back and forth, we got into some conversation, and so I was like, well, what are you gonna do once you leave here? He's like, well, I've got a class that I'm going to go to when I get back to New York. It's like, class? This guy was like, then he was like 70 years old. So it's like, you to go to the class? It's so says, yeah, artists should always train. That was my lesson. So I always train because artists should always train. You should always challenge yourself. You should always stretch yourself. You should always look for that peak because you never quest it. You're always seeking it.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Glad you're here. And David, why did you become an actor?
So I could sit on this stage and listen to these guys talk because it's so inspiring. And it goes to what you're saying, that it never stops. And I also, as I'm listening to you, think what you're hearing is people's journey into finding themselves. Which hopefully we all do, no matter what where life takes us. But, and in my case, I grew up in a small town in upstate New York. But one of the advantages it had, when I was 8 years old, they built a performing arts center there, which became a very popular venue. And it was the two, aside from like rock bands and Ethel Merman, the two organizations, the New York City Ballet and the Philadelphia Orchestra. If you know anything about ballet or you know about classical music, those are two of the greatest institutions of their kind. And they came, so as an 8-year-old, so it was a big deal for the community that these people were there. And so my mom and dad became subscribers, and they took me. And one of the things I saw was a ballet production of A Midsummer Night's Dream. George Balanchine was one of the great choreographers of all time, and he created this ballet of Shakespeare's play, Midsummer Night's Dream. And it had, the music for it was, again, if you know classical music, it was Mendelssohn's music, which is some of the most beautiful music ever written, plus it has the Wedding March. And it was, there was a guy who danced the role of Puck. Puck is this sort of impish, fairy. He works for the King of the Fairies. And Arthur Mitchell was, at that time, as far as I know, the only black dancer in classical ballet. He certainly was in that company. Mm-hmm. And he danced Puck, and he was incredible. And at the end of Shakespeare's play, Puck has a monologue, "If we shadows have offended, think but this, and all is mended." And so Balanchine gave Arthur Mitchell, the dancer, a dance version of a monologue, which was, he danced solo. He had a broom. He was cleaning up the stage as he did this dance, and he was surrounded by the other fairies as he was dancing. And the Mendelssohn music plays. There's these beautiful flutes that end as they softly die that piece. And as the flutes were fading out, Arthur came down to about here on the stage, and he bowed as the curtain descended. And as the curtain descended and he bowed, he floated.
Oh, wow.
Up into the air. And I can see it to this day. Every time I tell this story, the hair stands up on the back of my neck. It was the most magical thing. And when they had a revival of the production not that long ago, a couple of years ago, and I went specifically to see if I had imagined it, because it was so magical. And sure enough, that's what they did. And watching it, I realized that what they do is all these fairies dancing around. They actually, when you're not looking, they hook a rope to his back, and then up he goes. But it didn't make me want to be a ballet dancer. It didn't. I couldn't even put into words exactly what it was, except I know, looking back, that was it. Mm-hmm. It was, and then I went on as a kid seeing other performances there, and the orchestra and all that. And I have sort of like your track with visual arts. I also was on a musical track. I played the piano and I played the organ, and that was all very important to me. The other thing that was very important to me as a young person was dying. I thought death was so theatrical. I didn't know that that's what it was. And I would see it like in TV shows or movies or whatever. And when in my house, we had a staircase that was carpeted. And when I would come down for breakfast in the morning, I would stop at the landing, pretend to be shot, and fall down the stairs. Again, early warning signs, but I didn't know what that was. I just loved it, and I loved, when I saw Bonnie and Clyde, the movie was on TV, and they all died in slow motion. I just thought it was the cat's pajamas. And last step of this was in my elementary school. I went to a public school, public junior high, public high school in this little town. And in the library, I found a collection of 5 of Shakespeare's great plays, slightly simplified for younger people. Not hugely, but they made a few adjustments. And Julius Caesar, and he gets stabbed to death. And so in elementary school, twice, I think in 4th grade, I staged one simpler and one once I found with the real text. Then I had to do it again with the actual Shakespeare's complete text with my little friends, and I figured out the second time how to rig a fake toga. I had a sheet that I had pre-set with blood that was folded up so that they would all stand around me and stab me, and I could let it fall down. And then they'd back up and I'd fall. I know, it's crazy. But it was the real deal. And so I did it for fun. I went to a summer camp where they had Gilbert and Sullivan shows. I watched them. I was in some. I directed some. I did some we did Midsummer Night's Dream in high school. I played Oberon, and we did other shows. But when I went to college, I went as a music major. And this is the final part of this story until the next part. But I had a lot of roommates who were theater majors, and so I ended up doing a really small part in the play A Man for All Seasons. And it was the senior project of someone who was, Rob Brown, who was graduating. And this was Archbishop Cranmer. It was, you can't find a smaller part. And I think I had 2 lines or something, and mostly I just sat there and watched. And after the performance, the head of the theater studies department came up to me and said, "You were really good." And I thought, doing what? I didn't even get to die. What are you talking about? But that one thing, and I think this is something that we all have, I'm sure we all have, that one person who said that one thing, or that one person who helped, is everything. And that one thing said, well, maybe I should do this more seriously. And so I started taking classes and met Jennifer in classes, and we had great teachers. And one of the important things, this was at Yale undergrad, not the drama school, but undergrad. And the bulk of the teachers there were practicing artists in New York. So they were not academics, they were people of the theater. The last thing I'll say about this is that after that, I found out that my dad, he was still around when I found this out, had always wanted to be an actor. And when he got out of college, it was 1932, it was a depression, he wanted to go to New York and be an actor, and his dad said, look, why don't you wait till this thing blows over, and then if you want to go be an actor, you can do it. He met my mom, they got married, World War II happened. But subsequently, long before I ever came along, he was doing community theater in Saratoga, and I was doing a show on Broadway long after he was gone, and a group of people from my hometown came and they brought me copies of his reviews, and he was great. It said he was so crazy and so funny, and I thought, and so without having known that, it was in the blood, you know, like some wonderful disease, and so that's how I ended up here.
You guys made me think about a couple of things. One is, I think you mentioned, Alexander, this idea of fitting in, that so many young people who don't feel like they fit in. And I have kind of a humorous story about that. My parents got divorced when I was in high school, and I was the eldest child, and I was having a lot of issues around that. So I decided to go to boarding school, which no one in my family had ever been to boarding school, and I just announced to my parents, I've applied to boarding school, I got in, and you're gonna pay for it now, and I'm going. And when I got to boarding school, Andover, they had 4 dining halls, and as a teenager, you had to decide which dining hall to eat in. And there was the preppy dining hall, the nerd dining hall, let's see.
Jocks.
The jock dining hall, absolutely, and the freak dining hall. And the freak dining hall, this is kind of in those days, some of it was sort of hippies, but really what the freak dining hall was, the theater kids. And I went to the freak dining hall and never left. And I found, like you said, my tribe, my community, I felt like I belonged. And I think that's something I've always felt about theater. The other word that came up a couple of times was the word calling. And forgive the people that have heard this story 400 times from me, but there was only one time in my life where I really thought about not doing theater anymore professionally. And I had just gotten married in Bogota, Colombia, and I'd come home and I called my dad, who was a doctor. He'd been a Presbyterian minister, became a doctor, a really incredible person. And I called him and I said, Dad, you know, I'm thinking about applying to medical school, because he'd gone to medical school, and I'd gone for a little while when I was young. And first of all, he said he'd disown me, and because of all the student loans that I still had to pay from all the other schools I went to. But this is what he said to me. He said, Jennifer, you have always been a theater person, and I will tell you, it's your calling. It's not a job. You don't have a choice. And he said, you were born with something, that this is where you become yourself, and this is your calling in life. And he said, and I think he knew what that word meant, having been a minister and then a doctor. And this is the last thing he said. He said, it gets me a little choked up. My father's no longer here, but he said, we have doctors to heal our bodies, but we need artists to heal our souls. And he really meant it. And I never looked back again. And I was worried about, like a lot of us, about money. I was worried about, I'm getting married, I want to have kids, how am I going to support them? And the final part of that story is my son went through the same thing in college. Everyone hears me talk about him. He's a singer-songwriter in LA, but went to USC. In his first year, he declared pre-med instead of going to the music schools, and he was miserable. And I would talk to him almost every day, and one day I told him the story of my father, and he applied to the music school, got in, and I think about once a week, my son, this is many years now, will write me a little note and just say, thank you. And that's something I really believe, that I think artists are born, and then they have to get made. And that goes to the next question, which is, let's talk a little bit about training. So this is a passion or a calling or whatever it was. I got on stage and something changed. How did you pursue this, you guys, in your young adult and adult lives? Where does training fit in to your careers and who you are as an artist today? So, Alex?
Sure. Yeah, I mentioned it in my first answer, but I received a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Musical Theater from Western Illinois University. I was, kind of in my senior year of high school, getting out and auditioning for some colleges, and had this kind of idea of what I thought was, a good program and the program for me. And, I got some rejections, I got some acceptances, I got a couple scholarships here and there, and had some choices in front of me. And the one thing I told myself going into all of these auditions was like, I am not going to a state school, and I am not going to a state school near my home. And I'm from the Quad Cities, which is Iowa, Illinois border, like an hour and a half north of Western Illinois. And I went to a state school in the closest one that I could have. And it was exactly what I needed. It was individualized attention, and those people that, as David was starting to mention, did take that interest in you and said, hey, you're good at this. You know what? Let's work. Let's improve. Let's find where you want to go. And it worked out really well for me, I think, because while I was in kind of my individualized track of musical theater and kind of performance, I had all of these other interests and desires within still the realm of theater, and I knew I really wanted to direct. I knew I had some interest in producing, and I really wanted to just be the best actor leaving there that I could. That music, I'd been singing for a long time, since 6th, 7th grade was when I joined choir, and knew that singing is something I can practice on my own. It's good to go check in with a teacher once every so often and make sure you're keeping your technique up, that you're breathing from the right places, all of these other things. But I knew, I was like, it's so much more difficult, I think, probably to find a really good acting teacher where you are, as opposed to somebody who can be a good vocal coach for you. And I put myself, we had an extra amount of extracurriculars or electives, and every time I put myself into another acting class of, let's do both levels of the acting, 3 of the Shakespeare and the Chekhov. And then once I passed that, I wiggled one of those people who really encouraged me was the head of our MFA acting program, Bill Kincaid. And he had taken an interest on me in kind of early on, and I went straight to his office after, and I said, I've got a whole nother year here, my senior year, what else can I do? And he said, I could let you, take some of the grad level classes if you wanted. You'd have to audit them. And I said, done, sign me up. And so, yeah, it was Pinter and Brecht and somebody else but really different stylized stuff that just continue to open up my eyes to, there's so many forms and of theater, and the Greeks do it differently than the Brits do it differently than the Americans, and so many great teachers of Alexander technique and Stella Adler and all of these people, and I think taking a multitude of those classes, I don't think I personally ever want to be I'm a viewpoints actor, I'm a Chekhov actor, whatever that is. I want a little piece of this all, and I can find my technique and how I want to approach texts and plays, from this kind of wider perspective. So it was something that was really important to me. I knew I wanted it before I went into the scene. That I didn't want to just go to kind of a quick conservatory program. I wanted a full degree out of this. And then for me also training too, I think encompasses teaching a little bit. Shortly after school, I went on and toured doing some TYA shows, Theater for Young Audiences. And some of those I was teaching and directing kids in a show. So me and my tour partner would show up in a town, we'd direct a play of 80 children between the two of us in 5 days, and which was always a little wild, but it taught me so much because I was re-articulating all of the lessons and so many things that I had learned. One of the shows was Wizard of Oz, and I was working with the Ozians. They have the song about how they love money. And got into it. I was like, so yeah, let's talk about your objectives. What do you want with this? And then I was like, and in so many ways, money is a construct. And they all looked at me like, what the fuck does that mean? And I was like, okay, let me take this back a little bit. But it was so eye-opening for me just to get some of that experience, and it just continued to make me know that I want to be in practicing situations, in shows, directing shows, all of those things, but I want to continue to get better as an artist. And part of that is, yes, the experience, but part of that is going back to those roots of training. So that's ended up how I kind of found Jennifer when I had moved to Denver. It seemed like an institution that I wanted to be a part of. Quickly became the associate artistic director and her assistant, and we worked together on so many projects. And it was, again, a thing where I was taking class from her, but then I was also, she'd say, hey, can you give everyone notes? I know you were taking notes through all of that. And then we'd sit and we'd chat a little about the notes after the fact of she was like, what are you really trying to get with that? Telling that actor that. I said, oh, well, I think, the outcome should be a little different because I don't really think they're hitting this line in the way that they need to. Something like that. And it was, again, an experience where I got to teach and grow as an artist kind of all at the same time. So it's been an intentional thing for me, I think mostly, but then all of these also really lovely experiences that just kind of happen, and I say, oh, I learned and I grew from that, and that felt really good, and I want to kind of keep that in my life.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Dwayne, tell us a little bit about your training.
Well, basically, as I stated before, my training kind of started early because I did summer camp. My summer camp was on campus doing summer stock. And then in between times, then I would do theater at my high school, junior high school and high school. And we had our own little drama club and so forth that we would do shows in for. And so basically in having conversation with the artistic director, Dr. Leonard T. Rowley, who is no longer with us, but it was always this point that he always thought I was going to come there. It's like I'd have conversation with him. I would be in my junior year, and he says, so when you come up to the school, when you come here, then you're going to do blah, 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 and this is going to happen. And it's like, can I go somewhere else? It's like, and then my senior year, so when you get here, we're going to have things for you to do and blah, 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 blah. And so And it ended up happening that way. So I ended up going to school there, and it was really not a change for me because everything that I did as a college student, I was already doing as a 12-year-old, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old during summer stock. Because the requirement of that particular degree, which was a BFA, I had a double major actually, BFA in theater and English. I took the English on because my mom's like, you may want to be a teacher. So I was like, oh, okay, I'll take that double major. So, but we were required, regardless of what you emphasized in, which was, for me, acting, we also had to go into all the other areas. So we had to do construction, we had to do box office, we had to do lighting, we had to do, set design, we had to do costume design. We had to have all the knowledge along with our emphasis. So it gave me a very, very broad experience of knowing pretty much anything. By the time I graduated from college, I could have ran my own theater, basically because I had the knowledge base of that. And I didn't choose to do that. But coming to Denver, it was all about doing film, and I never did get around to doing it. But that's basically my emphasis of coming to Denver was to get into the film department. And so I ended up just staying and creating. I did create theaters. I did at least co-create. I wasn't the artistic director, but founding member for a couple of theaters that were around. So that's the long or the short of my particular experience. And the thing that I find that it's been helpful is working with Jennifer, who she won't say it, but I think she's pretty brilliant. And we don't realize how lucky we are to have a master's level instructor like her here in Denver, Colorado, because anywhere else you'd pay lots of money for, okay? And she doesn't get nearly as much as she deserves, but I've been very fortunate to work with her and grow with her in my particular experience and capacity as a performer, and thankful.
Thank you, and I didn't pay him to say that.
But the checks
Thank
in
you,
the mail.
Dwayne.
Checks in the mail.
And it's people like Dwayne that is why I keep doing this. When someone, we talk about egos in theater, but I have just been blessed that the artists I've worked with aren't those kind of artists. And artists who come to study, they really want to get better. So thank you for saying that, Dwayne. And so David, tell us a little bit about your education and training and how that's affected you in your professional life.
I will tell you. First of all, I'm jealous of Dwayne. Oh, by the way, double major English and theater.
Yay.
For the same reason, because
Yeah.
the parents are saying like, oh, you'll need a real job. But when I got through school and ended up being a theater major and doing stuff and learning from these great teachers that we had, I was going to go to drama school, and I had gotten into some English drama schools, and I was working at this summer theater in Williamstown, where once again, it's a summer theater, but we were working with the top professional actors in the business, and we were doing Chekhov and Tennessee Williams and the Greeks, and it wasn't light fare at all. So it was a great training ground, and a dear man named Edward Herman, who is no longer with us, was an actor there. And he said to me, he had written recommendations for me to go to some of these schools that I got into, but he said, before you spend any more time or money on school, why don't you go to New York and see if you even want to do this for a living? And that was part one. But part two, and this is why he is a mensch, is that he contacted a casting director, a very important casting director in New York, and set up a general audition for me. So he not only gave me the advice, but he also gave me the entree. And I went and auditioned for this woman. I did a general audition. A few months later, they called me up to audition, as Jennifer mentioned, for this show, Beyond Therapy, which was a Broadway play. So I got to New York in the fall of '81, and in the spring of '82, I was on stage in a Broadway show, unbelievable, with John Lithgow and Diane Weiss, crazy people. And but the other most important thing about that experience was I got to go through the whole artistic experience. I was working with these amazing people, I was in heaven, and audiences were laughing their asses off. And the opening night was incredible, and my mom and dad were in the audience, and they finally said, oh, he should do this. This is like... And the New York Times review came out, and he didn't like it. And I went up the street to the opening night party where Chris Durang, the playwright, was there. They had cleared away the food. The room was empty. He was there with one friend. The next night, no laughs.
Oh, no.
And we closed in 2 weeks. And I still loved it. That was the thing that made me think, the answer to Ed Herman's question about, see if you really want to do this, I thought, oh, I even want to do it when it sucks. So, but the thing is, I then have, ever since then, played catch-up with training, because I got a job, and then I started working and doing new plays, and started working in regional theater, and suddenly you were in a big theater, and you were doing, I don't know, Shakespeare, and your voice had to reach to the back wall, and I was like, okay, there it comes. I didn't know what I was doing, but I sort of learned from the people around me, and by osmosis, and then over the years, I've also been able to then glom on to training. Like you mentioned Alexander Technique. Alexander Technique, not worth explaining to you, except when it is done well, when it is taught well, it is God's gift to people, and acting in particular. And I found a great teacher because I was losing my voice doing a show. And an actress friend of mine said, oh, I just lost my voice during a show. You should talk to this woman. And I've been working with her now for like 20 years. Because this has nothing to do with your voice. It has everything to do with everything. So that's how it's been for me, taking voice lessons, taking drum lessons because I had to learn to play a drum in a play or what all. And so I'm jealous of the structure that Jennifer has created, of the resource, because it is so tangible. And the idea that Dwayne has trained in every facet of theater, even if you were only acting and not doing any other kind of thing, to have that depth of experience inform you. I started directing, and just like I had to pretend like I knew how to use my voice, I had to pretend like I knew how to direct, because I didn't take any directing courses or anything like that. And sometimes I did okay, and sometimes it really was not very good, because there's stuff you should know. So at this advanced age, I'm learning a lot. I'm taking lessons and consciously and studying, going back to, let me tell you just one lesson that was the most important probably ever. There was a great, great, great actress and teacher named Uta Hagen. Mm-hmm. Ms. Hagen started HP Studio. Herbert Berghoff, HP, was her husband. One of the great teachers of all time. Mm-hmm. And the last, I didn't study with her, but her book was our Bible, Respect for Acting. She literally wrote the book on acting.
Yep.
And the last play she ever did was, she was in her 80s. It was called 6 Dance Lessons in 6 Weeks. And it was a 2-person play. And it was Uta Hagen and me. And I reread that book before. I thought, how am I going to go on stage with this woman? This is unbelievable. And she was incredible. She was a total force of nature. We had a big knockdown, drag-out fight, like the first week. She almost quit. She was so angry at me. And I was able to, like, talk her out of it. And after that point, we fell completely in love and were to her last days. But the lesson that I got, the onstage lesson that I got from her, I had a speech in the play to her. We were sitting on a divan in her living room. And it was about my mother, who I think had died of cancer or something like that. And I had lost my grandfather to Alzheimer's disease. So I knew what that progression was. And in working on this play, I never had to reach for the emotions of the speech. There was a certain point in the speech where I'd always, describing what happened in this fake mother's decline, I would just start to get emotional, and I'd have trouble, the tears would come. And one night, I'm sitting there, and I'm doing the speech, and I got a little bit farther than I usually do with the emotion not coming. And then I got a little bit farther, and I was getting like almost through the speech, and nothing was happening. And I looked at her, and I thought, this is Uta Hagen. I can't pretend to cry in front of Uta Hagen. It's like the greatest sin, imaginable. So I just said, I remembered in her book, she said, in terms of emotion, when you're acting, You do all the preparation, you do all the work, but don't try to pinpoint it. Don't do that. Just trust it. And I remember that as I was looking to her face, and so I finished the speech, dry as a bone, and the next line was, would you like a glass of water? And I went to say, would you, and lost it. And that was the end of the act, and we got up and we're walking off in the dark, and Ms. Hawkins said to me, that was interesting.
When I picked up David and we started talking about all kinds of things, the first night we were hanging out together, and one of the stories I told him was that I was one of those very geeky teenagers who loved school. And I really did. I loved school, and I loved studying everything. I loved physiology and genetics. I spoke French. I studied art history. And the one, I knew I did want to be an actress, but the one major, my parents really wanted me to go to Yale. They had both gone there to graduate school. I mistakenly thought when I went and interviewed that it had something to do with the Yale School of Drama. But in fact, Yale undergrad had nothing to do with the Yale School of Drama, so my parents kind of used that on me. But when I got there and had to look at a major, the only major that would let me take anything I wanted to take was theater. And I talked to Bart was the head of that department, and he said, well, theater is the study of everything. Theater is about the human condition. So whatever classes you want to take, I mean, you'll have to take a couple theater classes in there somewhere. But, and so that was one of the reasons I began to study theater undergrad. And then I did apply to the Yale School of Drama in my senior year. I was directing plays and thought I was amazing. And I did not get in. And I was extremely upset about that. But so I went to New York. My mom and dad lived in New York. I went to live with my mom. But almost the day I graduated, I got a phone call from a director that I assisted at Williamstown. And he said, okay, you didn't get into the drama school. That's really good. And I said, why is that really good? And he said, because you're going to be my assistant for the rest of your life. And I spent 4 years assisting this man, Jerry Gutierrez, in New York. And I will honestly say there's lots of ways to get an education in theater, but I learned more almost than in my whole life by being in rehearsal, watching this man direct plays, watching actors work with him, and every now and then he'd turn to me and say, so what do you think, Jennifer? And and it's Faye Dunaway or something. And well, I think you're so good, Ms. Dunaway. But I really, a lot of it came from him, and then I eventually, a few years later, reapplied to Yale Drama School. I was not going to, my ego was very bruised, but a playwright named Richard Greenberg, who some of you might know, I'd been working with him, and he said, he was at Yale, and he said, you've got to come here. And I said, I'm never going to get in, just forget it. But he said, no, just please apply, then we can work together. And I did get in. But I will say this, I went there to go to the directing program, and I'll end with this, but it was day one, they made all the directors take all the acting classes, and you had to audition as an actor, even if you couldn't act. We all auditioned as actors, and we got in, however, but it was, our first year of study was Chekhov, all year, with a brilliant, brilliant man who's the Uta Hagen sort of my time, a man named Earl Gister. And day one in class with him, there was something he taught called the 5 questions. And all the light bulbs I remember going off in my head. And to this day, I teach exactly what he taught me, and bang that on my heart. But I really do credit my own education, which is has been the basis for my directing work, my teaching work, everything I've done in theater has really come from these master teachers. The institutions are wonderful, but it's been alluded to, it's the teacher in the institution. And what David was talking about, we got to work with people who are not just academics writing about theater or, theorizing about how you should do things. They were directors on Broadway. They were designers. They were playwrights. And so working with those kind of teachers really was what changed my life. The other thing was the practice. I did not have a big ego about this. I assisted everyone. Anyone who asked me, I'm doing this project, will you assist me? And I would say yes, and I just said yes. And I would sit in a room and be quiet, which is hard to imagine now. But I will say, I've taught acting much of my adult life, and I also still direct plays, but I am so grateful for the teachers that I had. Nikos, Jerry Gutierrez, Earl Gister, Lee Brewer, so many more. But it was these great artists who, not all artists can articulate technique. Not all great artists can help you know how to do it. They can tell you what to do, but it's the ones that guide you towards how to do it. And, I've never looked back, and I credit everything I do in my life to that handful of teachers, none of whom are with us, but they're inside of me. So we're going to change direction a minute, very different for a second. I'm going to ask something of David, which is, before we get to the big topic, the main topic, which is why does theater matter to us today and to you, and talk about that a bit, I do want to ask David to talk a little bit about television and film, because it's been a big part of his life, not as much a part of my life. Someone is in this room that I did assistant direct a movie once, and we'll talk about that later. But I just want to ask you, how did you get into television and film? And if you could talk a little bit about what is the difference in working in those mediums? How did that affect your acting? And do you think there is a difference between theater and film acting? And we won't, have an hour discussion on it, but it's so important today because we get so many young people and everyone wants to be on camera. And today, camera is everywhere. That's what we're doing. Self-tapes, Instagram, Facebook. We're all making our own movies, everything, but I came from a generation that didn't really believe that acting in theater was different than acting on film. It was the size of the audience. It's one. But I want to hear what you have to say about it, because this has been a big part of your life, the television and film aspect.
Okay, and I will be quick about it. The first thing, though, it occurs to me in the play Vanya and Sonia and Masha and Spike by Chris Durang, the character of Masha is a movie star, and she's asked by young aspiring actors, what's the difference between acting on TV and acting on film? And Masha says, I'm going to paraphrase now, forgive me, Chris. Well, in film, you have a camera, and you must speak very quietly. And in theater, you're in a big room, and you must speak very loudly.
Okay.
End of
Scene.
That had as much to do with Chris's feelings about theory in art. But what I would say is a couple things. One, when it's still true, Law and Order, things like that. When you were a young actor in New York and you were doing theater, and especially if you're doing off-Broadway theater and eating peanut butter, those shows, there were a few things like Miami Vice, I forget, Spencer for Hire, these things, that you'd get a gig for one or more of these things, and you'd get a little camera experience because you were doing this to go make money. And so that was part one. Part two is when I got, actually Frasier and also another show that I had done before Frasier, they were both TV sitcoms shot in front of live audiences. Oh, wow. And many of them were with people who were already theater actors, like Kelsey Grammer on Frasier, theater actor John, God bless him, Mahoney, one of the great theater actors, and on and on and on. And what happened is, because I had done small roles in film, and I was very self-conscious. Some of us who are actors aren't actually outgoing people. Seriously, we are outgoing on stage because that's where we can be. And so to be in a room and have a camera here and 700 people over here, and so my voice would kind of go down here. I used to say that I had the gift of taking a small part and making it smaller. But the gift of these TV series was that's not how they filmed. You had a live audience, and and there'd be 4 cameras, and the cameras never got that close. And the way it was filmed, it was lit generally, so it wasn't specific. And you would do these scenes, and you'd do them maybe a couple times so that they could get all the coverage they needed to do. And every once in a while, they'd come in for a close-up. And after 11 years, I forgot about cameras. I was able to, and we did some pretty big stuff, some pretty emotional stuff, some small stuff. We did everything on that show in front of cameras. And I found afterwards, when I started to do stuff in front of cameras, I was like, oh, I don't care anymore that there's these machines or there's all these people. And so I don't know if that sort of answers your question, but that's what I'm going to say.
Okay. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
And do you guys have anything to say about film and television in terms of your own perspective on, you know, acting for the camera as opposed to acting on stage?
For me, I'm Marcia. Yeah, I think that there is some technical aspects of film and television that you have to deal with, hitting your mark and making sure that your angles are right and all that type of thing. But at the end of the day, it still rolls down to you as the actor that projects that to be captured. And the difference between that for me in film and theater is that you do it and it's gone.
You're here.
You might have that one moment and it sparks for you, but you can never come back to that moment again. It's every night it's a different performance. Even though you're speaking the same lines, you're going through the same movement, same blocking, it's still different. It's still fresh. It's still something that has never been seen before. Whereas you have the fortune of capturing it once you get it on film. If that take is right, the take is right, and it's going to be there, and you'll be able to see that forever, but never in theater, never in live theater.
Anything you?
Before
You go ahead.
I just want to tag on that. When we get to why does theater matter?
Yeah.
That's why. Because for the people in this room, it happens once.
It's happening right
And
now.
even if you come back, it will be a different event, and that is the value. It's like the beautiful teacup that once it breaks, it's gone. I just love that you said that. Thank you, because that's part of the deal.
Yeah. Anything else you want to add to that?
No, I mean, I think they both covered it pretty well, but yeah, theater is the great ephemeral art. It happens and then it's gone. But film, you can. If you didn't get the take, you can do it again and again. And I agree with Dwayne, there is some technical things to learn. I'm happy I took an acting for the camera class in college, where it was some of those here's the kind of marks thing, here's some basic kind of technique. And then once you're doing it in practice, I don't have a ton of experience with it, but done some small things here and there. When there is, as David was saying, a group of 30 people behind, and there's somebody at the snack table and a makeup person, and there's, a camera guy and another one who's holding one of the giant boomsticks right over your face, and the camera's here, and they actually need you to look here. I think it is so helpful to be able to rely on solid acting training in those moments, because I really appreciated David's story about Uta Hagen, because I felt something similar when I was doing a run of Assassins, Stephen Sondheim's musical about the potential or actual assassins of US presidents. And it's a dark show. I mean, it's very cool. I love it. I really like what I think it says about America and other things there, but it's dark to put yourself in the shoes of a murderer every night and thinking about, how did they get here? Where are they right now? What is the moment before that took us to the motivation of this exact moment? They say, I'm ready, I'm gonna pull the trigger, I'm gonna go do this. And sometimes it doesn't always come out. I'd be really filled with emotion when I was, walking up. I did Leon Czolgosz, who did shoot William McKinley, and sometimes it was this really heightened emotional thing where I'm wiping streaming tears off my face as I'm ready to go towards this guy, and sometimes it just wasn't, and it was this very kind of stoic, resolute, I need to do this kind of a thing, and not pushing because I shed tears last night is, I think, really important, and again, where kind of theater acting techniques kind of come from, because it allows you to live in the moment, directly what's happening, and it doesn't matter that it didn't happen that way the night before, and it doesn't matter that somebody maybe skipped a line or something like that. You just have to keep going, and you have this great kind of through line that you get to keep through that, to keep this, kind of intention of a character, as opposed to if you didn't quite look at the camera in the right way, they'll yell stop, and you do it again, and you do it again, and you do it again, maybe from a different angle. So just I think there are important differences, but to me, again, the technique, the training shouldn't be different. Ultimately, you should be able to rely, kind of on that solid acting training, regardless of whether that's for a stage or a camera.
Yeah, I'll just say one thing about it too, that what these guys are actors, and what some people don't realize is that acting is really about transformation. It isn't about being yourself. It's about you walking in the shoes of someone else. And there's all kinds of things we can get into about what we work on about that. And I think the extraordinary work that we see on film and television, for me, the actors I went to school with who were all theater actors, 90% of them ended up going into the film and television industry. But they didn't take on-camera classes. They didn't, they weren't trained to, quote unquote, be real or to just come from myself. They still were playing a character, an objective, stakes, actions. I think people sometimes just don't realize the artistry that goes into what these guys do. And there's another thing came into my head while they were talking. There was the man who started the Juilliard School. One of them was a man named Michel Saint-Denis, a French man, a brilliant writer, and he wrote a book called The Rediscovery of Style, which I also quote a lot, and he said, theater comes from life, but theater is not life. And life in the theater demands transposition and style. And what he was talking about is this is an art form. And same with film. Someone wrote it, there's language, they've written these people, and yes, these guys they're human beings and they pull from their own human experience, is going to be present. Who they are is in there. But it's about walking in the character's shoes. And I think that's not always, today I find more and more younger artists coming in thinking, because there's so much more on-camera work, and no high school kid can go to college anymore without a self-tape. You don't just get to apply. You have to put yourself on camera. So there's a kind of illusion that acting for the camera is about just being kind of real and hanging out here. Instead of that there's still a character, an objective, and something that propels the story. So anyway, I think this is a whole other conversation, but it's important to me, and thank you for talking about it. And I know David has a lot of experience in this area, but now we're going to switch to kind of, in the 11th hour, the fourth question in my 5 questions is, why does theater matter today? And why does it matter? Why does it matter to you today, but why do you think it matters in society, in our culture, in the world we're living? Why should we keep doing it? So I just let you guys start talking, whoever wants to.
I would change the question.
Okay. Even better. Okay.
How about those Mets? No. Should we?
Okay.
Does theater matter?
Does
Not why
theater
does it matter.
still matter?
Does it
Okay,
matter? I think
okay.
that's the core question, and us 4 are only part of the answer, because you're part of the answer too, as the audience always is. So I think it's not a foregone conclusion. Obviously, it's our lives, as Dwayne said, it's our calling. Of course it matters to us, but not without you. So that, to me, is where we find the meaning, whatever we end up thinking. So.
Yeah, I think that's interesting to note that, something can be wildly important to you, and yet if it's not reciprocated kind of on this other end, then it is like, who are we doing it for? Yes, of course we do it for ourselves, but it is supposed to be a shared experience, something that you're all seeing together that you can go talk about when you get home, that an energy is exchanged in these dark rooms. I am personally a neurodivergent person with ADHD, and concentration is not something that comes super easily to me. I'm constantly kind of moving, thinking about next things, and easily distracted sometimes with that. However, theater as an audience member and as an artist on stage, to me, has found that concentration, that thing where I don't want to pick up my phone kind of instinctively and just like, oh, do I have a text? Oh, there's a little notification or something like that. It's this place where I'm able to zone in and feel a sense of community through this connected energy that we all share. I think there's a lot of people out there that, specifically theater people, who say kind of, theater's like a church. And for me, it is in a lot of ways. It's a communal experience that we all get to share and don't have to, kind of think about our own troubles, the things on our to-do list, and that doesn't mean you can't have a personal reflective moment. I think that's actually really powerful as an audience member, to see something on stage and connect it back to your own life of, oh my God, why have I been acting like that? Or why is my relationship mirroring this one? Or what traits do I personally share? There's so much room for reflection, and I think that all just generally makes us better human beings at the end of the day. So I do think it matters. It matters, again, for all of our livelihoods, but even kids doing their first play, that first time to get up on stage and not be the shy kid in the back of the class, or to, where they do get to just be silly and cut loose of, the rules of, what they were raised with. I will share just kind of this last tidbit that frequently gets me emotional because it is burned in the back of my brain. Similarly, to David, when I was on tour and teaching and doing these shows, I was doing Wizard of Oz. I had this group of a big old Catholic family of 9 kids, and they had all come. They were homeschooled, but they came out and did these shows every summer because that was kind of their opportunity to do so. The oldest one was named Annika, and was mentally, physically disabled, nonverbal, was in a power wheelchair, and I had a co-director with me. We both about split up the group of kids kind of in half, and one had more principals and maybe one kind of ensemble group. One had 3 or 4 kind of ensemble groups. And we were sitting down doing the casting. The mom had come up to me at first and said, all of her siblings do it every year, but she's actually never gotten the chance. And we said we want to do it this year. And they brought up this ramp for her to get up on stage. And before we cast, we had to go out, try it, make sure it was safe. And I've never seen anybody light up like that in my life. I mean, it is so palpable, and it was 2015, 9 years ago. And it's where I know theater matters, that this, even if you choose not to do it for a profession, that there is something really magical that happens in these dark spaces. And we quickly cast the show. I said, I want her. And it was the best challenge for me all week to think about, how do I restage this? How do I turn what some people would see as a disadvantage into a strength, and somewhere where this girl can shine that she has not had the opportunity probably to do so. And it was so gratifying just to, one, see her have those opportunities, but see all these other kids around her having this experience too, where, I was talking about, I was like, okay, normally I do kind of a big circle conga line with this, but I thought, this time we could have maybe Annika do like a circle, we could do like a circle around her, and some of these kids would start popping up with their own ideas of like, yeah, and what if we all, put our hands on her chair and all did like a jump around it, and it was because this space where everyone gets to be free and creative and collaborative, it involved everyone, and it got everyone's juices kind of flowing, and I just thought, this is the experiences that people need to grow character, to treat others with kindness, to respect one another. It builds all these beautiful foundational things, and I want to do it for the rest of my life because of that.
Dwayne, thanks, Alex,
Yeah.
and for sharing that. Dwayne, any thoughts about why it matters to you, or why you think it should matter to all of us? Or does it matter, as David said?
Does
it matter?
theater matter? Yes. Why does it matter? Because it feeds our soul. It gives us opportunity to share. When we are children, we do theater all the time. Children play house, they play doctors, they play whatever they play. That's theater. Before there was any type of formality or structure, I'm sure there were storytellers that we go back ages were storytellers. That is theater. Okay, now we put a construct to it. Now we put a name to it. Now we write scripts and books and construct things for it. But if your mom read you a story from a storybook and she encapsulated each character in the story, you were watching theater. Okay, so it's a part of us. It's what makes us who we are. It's what helps us to communicate with each other. It's what helps us to relate to each other.
We've talked a lot amongst us about COVID, what happened during COVID for all of us. And Zoom was this great gift from the tech gods, and that we still use. But it was a really weird time, not just because of the fears around the disease and all those things, but we were all at home doing film, making films, doing scene study, doing actor training, all this on our little computer screens in our living room or our bedroom or wherever. And I learned a lot. And I learned about, survival and coming up with ways to keep going. But it really was when we were allowed to go back into a theater. What is it? You love not the thing you have until you've lost it. That's Shakespeare. Is that when we went and did Orpheus Descending at Su Teatro, Dwayne was in the production, and I just remember the experience of being in a room again with each other, without those masks on, and also with you guys. Like that, I always say that if a tree falls in the woods and no one's there to hear it, does it make a sound? As we talk about in theater, that there's three of us. There's the two of us on stage, and then there's the audience member, and it's a triangle. And we lost all that during COVID. And for me, coming out of it, all it did was reinforce it for me. And I think the word someone brought up, you did maybe, this idea of our church, that for a lot of artists, we go into a darkened room, and you're sitting there, we're sitting here, and something happens that is, I think, a very spiritual thing. It's a connection that happens. And going back to Nikos, he said, when he talked about Chekhov, he would say that Chekhov wrote about how hard it is to live and what we do to go on living. And so the greatest theater for me is, yes, theater exposes all the difficulties of the human condition, but it's the hope and the redemption. It's the plays where something happens, but because of it, something else happens that gives you a new idea, a new way of dealing with it. And the other word we keep bringing up is truth. That's why I say it's not about it's real, because what's happening up here in a play isn't real, but we're trying to get at the truth. Who are we? What do we need? What do we do to go on living? What's wrong? What's the conflict? So for me, yes, theater is what I do to go on living, but I think we need it more in this culture than we ever have before. And I work with a lot of young people that have had a really hard time since COVID. My daughter's in the room, and she teaches very little people. And I know that it's become a different world, and we have all these this great gifts of technology. But I also think we've been really separated. We've been really isolated. We've been disconnected from ourselves and from each other. And what theater is about, and you said it the other day to me, is just about connection. It's about we connect to the people on stage, and then we connect to ourselves. And I think, it's sentimental, but I think we become whole in a way. So for me, it's life and death. In terms of the meaning of life and hope and healing. That's the word. I think great theater is very healing. And it's been going on for centuries. Kurt Vonnegut said it's like the only institution that's been trying to die for 4,000 years or something. But it won't die, but it could. With all the technology we have now, we could say, why did you guys come out here today? Why should we bother? But I want David to say a few things about this, and then I also want to really turn it over and at least have 10 minutes or so of you guys. We want to hear what you think. You can ask us questions, but I also want, you can make statements. But is there anything else that any of this, the context of this for you?
What you just said made me think about when you talk about, Zoom and COVID and isolation and the lack of connection and all that. And I think when you say, will the theater last? We don't know. We're going into a time with AI. We're going into a time, which we really don't know how that is going to go. But I have a feeling, this is just my feeling, that things go like this. And I think, assuming that we actually survive AI, that we will also come to be so thirsty for a real person, because that's what the truth is. We know it. We are animals in the best sense of the word. And when we see AI people, I don't care how artfully they are constructed, there is a difference between how we connect. And that difference is in the extreme in something like AI, but that to me is the essence of why people come to the theater and will continue to come to the theater. And if things don't get too crazy, I think the theater will be coming back gradually. But if things get really crazy, we will need it more than ever. That's what I think.
So, with that having been said, we've still got a little bit of time left. We'd like to spend the next 10, 15 minutes. Drake, my brilliant assistant back there, who also wrote a play. People can raise their hand, and Drake is going to bring the mic around so we can hear you, or you can shout. So they've got a couple people up there. Yes, and you can ask someone a question on stage, or just say what you want, and yes, if you need to leave, we won't feel bad. But go ahead, sir.
Thank you, and I just wanted to thank each of you for the conversation. This has been very informative for me, and I've really enjoyed it. And Dwayne, thank you for bringing and sharing your talents out at Miners Alley in Golden. I happen to be on the Miners Alley Theater Board of Directors.
Oh.
And one of the questions we talk about at that level regularly at our meetings is how do we reach people in the community that may not have regular exposure to the theater? And I'm interested in your takes on that question and maybe advice that you can give us as a local theater company. How do we make inroads out in the community? And thank you very much.
And get people to come into the theater is what you're saying, yeah.
Well, I will speak on that because there's been a history here in Denver by the gentleman by the name of Henry Lowenstein. And some of you may know him, some of you may have not known of him. We have an awards ceremony in his name each year. And the thing that Henry was so good about was the fact that he wanted to expose everyone to theater wherever it was. And one of the things that he had was a touring program. He had a touring program when he was when the old Bond Feast was around. And some of you may or may not know that history, but where it certainly is the C Film and the bookstore over there that used to be Bond Feast Theater. From that, he had a touring company that toured all the schools in the state, period. There were 4 or 5 schools or 4 or 5 shows that toured those schools. In fact, I was in one and ended up becoming the producer of that one because once he passed away, the program disbanded. And the thing that's kind of interesting for me in that situation is that when he left that particular space, Bond Feast, and they went over to the Denver Civic Theater, which is now Su Teatro, it was an old meat packing company. And before that, it was a Nickelodeon. And so there was all these different transformations, and he wanted to make it into a theater. So it was not a theater when he moved there. There was a big giant refrigerator in the middle of the doggone building, literally, from the meat packing company. But the first thing he did was he hired me to teach children in that neighborhood acting. And we had a little room about the size of this stage. And he says, we've got to serve the people. So to answer your question, if you've got the vision, go do it. Just go do it. Don't think about it, just serve. Take it to whomever that needs it and serve.
All right, so Drake, are you still here? Yeah, sir in the back with the hand. And if you guys want to say your name when you talk. Oh, we got a woman
Hi.
in the back.
So I am a backstage theater person. When I was in high school, I was on stage once. As a mushroom, I came out in a new body-colored suit and a big pillow, and that was it. I went backstage. And one thing, I want to make 2 comments. One thing, the friends that I made in high school many, many years ago, I still have today. And that's the connection that I have. The other thing, too, is that I grew up in Chicago, came out here just a couple years ago, but spent a lot of time in the city going to the theater. There was one weekend that I went to see American in Paris. It was just a quick, we were downtown, we grabbed tickets, we went. And I remember sitting in the theater, I don't know what it was about that particular performance. And I thought, what an honor it is to be sitting in this theater, to be able to enjoy the talent from the stage. So I just wanted to share that it's an honor to be an audience member in theater.
Thank you, thank you. This man at the back was Drake raising his hand a lot. I want to give him and then we'll come down. Yeah.
Thank you, guys. I want to echo the other questioners to say thank you for coming tonight and sharing your time and your experience. There's just one thing in the discussion you were obviously talking about why is theatre important, and you all hit upon so many amazing reasons, but going back into the depths of my Greek theatre education about the word catharsis and how the citizens of the Greek cities, most notably Athens, as I recall, would go just to escape, to watch theatre to escape, and then go back to being good Athenians. being merchants or whatever, but they'd have that moment of catharsis. And we don't, as far as I can think, we don't really have that. Certainly not on screen, because you can pause it and go to the loo, or it's like you can break that mood. Whereas you were saying about how you come to church, and I'm not a religious person, theatre is my religion, but the thing is that you do go and you are not, I think forced is the wrong word, but you are enclosed with the performers for however much time, and you must experience the whole thing with them, watch them change, and hopefully that changes you to even think about something you would maybe never have been exposed to in any other form. And one other point, David, you brought up AI, which of course we're all thinking about in all sorts of, but certainly as performers and artists, and how I equate it to being a digital actor, which of course there are amazing things they can do with digital acting. And as you say, hopefully it's never that good that we don't know the difference. But also analog actors. And when you get up on stage, you're an analog actor. Vinyl never will die. Analog actors will never die because of everything we've talked about, because it's a shared experience. It's the electricity between humans and how that's never going to change. And as you say, David, how hopefully that pendulum will swing back when people want nothing to do with AI and they want to just go to the theatre to be free of it, just for a little while.
Thank you. The woman down here, Drake, right here. Feel free to say your names if you want to. So say hi to us, yeah.
Hi, I'm Sunny, and I want to say to you, David, just a comment, and then I have a question for you all. I stood at the backstage waiting for you after Spamalot, and you came out and signed the program for me. And I have nothing to do with theater, but that moment was a high point in my life. And I wanted to thank you, because I've been a fan of yours for years. I wanted to thank you for the generosity, the humbleness, and the kindness that you showed me then. That's part of theater to me. My colleague and I tonight, we are writers and publishers, and I would like you all to speak to the importance of a writer in your life, and somehow some comment of how important writers are to theater.
Well, I'll say one thing. I was, from a very young age, what I heard over and over again was actors are interpretive artists, but the fire, the life force of the theater is the writer. And that our job is to take that text and bring it to life. And then a director's job, I was taught, was to get text into the actors. So when you talk about writing, everything I've been trained, everything I've been taught, everything I do, it starts with those words. And even Jerry Gutierrez, who I alluded to, we did musicals on Broadway. In a musical, he would do what was called table work. We would spend one full week just going over the words at the table, even before the actors were allowed to sing. So the answer to me is the writer is the theater. And what we do is bring that to life, Anyway, you guys might have something else to say.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the writing was something that really clicked when in my acting class that was Chekhov-based, where the text was not something that I was like super used to as far as kind of traditional formatting, but it made me understand style so much and the importance of what writers are really trying to convey. So much of Chekhov's stuff was, yes, it was in the lines, but it was in what they weren't saying, and it made me just really be able to analyze a play from a new perspective, and try and think about, what's directly in the text? What is the writer trying to imply to us through the text? What are they using these pauses for, and what are they trying to convey about the relationship of these two people on stage? And it really then gives you a roadmap as an actor of what were they trying to tell me that this is supposed to be, to sound like, to look like. And you know, I really believe, in as far as acting goes, like, and my own kind of style, and like authenticity first. But authenticity to me has to come from the support of the text. And I think writers, you know, there's so many kind of greats of old, but there's so many great new ones coming out that are writing, I think, different styles, are writing about different subject material and different pieces of the human experience. And I think that is really integral to keeping theater alive, to keeping it interesting and relevant, is that, you know, there are some of the great shows that will always be out there and will play forever, but some of these new shows have to get seen, and you have to produce them. Because, you know, kind of in a similar way, they won't come if you don't. But, you know, if you do, you know, Vintage, it's coming up a lot today, but did The Inheritance last year by Matthew Lopez, I believe, which won a Pulitzer, I think, in drama, and it was a 3.5-hour play. I didn't look at my watch once, and I will say that doesn't always happen with some of the kind of greats of old, of like, oh man, this really drags. But it was 3.5 hours of text, but the pacing was so incredible, and it was like this really kind of contemporary story, and not something that I had seen before, of there's, you know, 20 queer people all on stage together, you know, talking about the AIDS crisis and, you know, where they were then and where they are now, and kind of the space in between. And it just, I think, because again, there are these companies that are putting out new shows and producing and trying to bring in new people. I think it's really important just to continue to get more perspectives and broaden our audience sizes, and all of that, again, just comes from the writer.
We are not going to have that much more time, so I would like to, I do want to hear from a couple more people, and I also want David to respond to that. Roy is behind you, Drake. I recognized him. I
My
met
name's
Roy,
Roy. Hi.
a long time ago.
I've dabbled in the theater since you directed me in a play in New York in 1982, Spring's
wow.
Awakening. I've adapted a quote that keeps me inspired in supporting theater and staying involved in the performing arts. It's from Albert Camus. Mm-hmm. He said, "Without culture and the freedom it implies, society, even when perfect, is but a jungle. That's why any authentic creation is a gift to the future."
Wow, beautiful.
I've seen 2 Shakespeare marathons in the last season at various important flagship theaters in America. And that gift is still being given to us more than 400 years later, that Bill Shakespeare gave us. And I am so impressed by the companies that continue over and over again to be inspired, to continue to bring the gift of theater, not just to today's audiences, but every time it happens, it's also for tomorrow's audiences. And the communication, now I'm mostly in the audience, and I feel just the same connection with a live audience that I felt was with a cast on stage. So thank you for doing this today, and thank you for the work that you do.
Thanks for being here. Anyone else have something? Yeah, over there. Mike, is that Mike? Yeah, okay. A playwright, Mike Brummel, playwright, yeah.
It's a takeoff a little bit of what this gentleman was just talking about. And you all made the point, and it's an excellent point, that theater, there's the connection between the actors and the individuals in the audience. And then the audience, the individual audience members, the opportunity to internalize that, grow with that. My question is, there's been some talk about technology and bringing technology into theater. And one of the things that stuck in my mind, there needs to be the audience interaction too. And that's one of the beauties of live theater, I think. And I dabble a bit in theater, and one of the things when I'm involved in a production, there's almost always, will you be live streaming it? And I almost always say, no.
No. No.
That's right, isn't it?
That's right. No.
I
Yeah.
also want to add one thing.
Yeah.
Jennifer had directed me 3 times in her plays. I played essentially the same character. A drunk has-been actor that flew in that play, and I did, oh my God. And then Tennessee Williams twice. But what I learned from that is don't ever act again. But there's so many. That was not.
Yeah.
We all have, you know, our places in theater, and I love that part about theater. But again, it's the technology, the way technology is kind of injecting itself. And again, I'm still learning about theater. I hope we all learn. Lines need to be drawn, right?
Go
In
for it.
response,
Yeah.
I just want to say, please act again. Don't let it go. I don't need to see it. I've seen you.
He's also, he's a wonderful writer, Mike Brummel.
Yes.
Anyone else have something you want to ask or say? Yes, sir.
One or two.
Down here, right here. Yeah.
It's incoming.
Drake's bringing the mic over. Don't fall on him. Yeah.
My wife and I, we returned from Greece
Oh, wow.
this past summer, and as with all tourists who go to Greece, you know, we went to various ruins, and our tour guide basically answered the question of why theater is so important. What I didn't know is that in these ruins, I always expected to see someplace where the athletes would do their thing. But I didn't know that in the same set of ruins, just a little bit away, would always be a theater. And the tour guide said that how important it was to the ancient Greeks that on one hand, it was how important it is to have a healthy body. And at the other venue, how important it was to have a healthy mind. And the healthy mind is all the things you've been talking about as far as stimulating the imagination, to learn things, to you know, have ideas about what you can do and what you would like to be doing. So it goes back 4,000 years at least.
I love that you brought up the word imagination, that's, you know, that's what this is about. Yeah.
Hi, the Greek girl will follow up with that question.
The Greek girl? Yeah.
As a young girl, my mom would take me to the theater all the time. Being a third-generation New Yorker, she would take me to the theater all the time, and to see stories. And as a child, it didn't really make sense because she would just automatically take me. It was just something we did, and it, like, to the point where we saw Sarah Jessica Parker playing Annie, and a relative said, I'm going to take her backstage to get a signature, and I had no clue what the heck that meant. But since when I got older, I started to go backstage. I did theater myself, and to this day, no matter where I'm at, on a stage or in an audience, that magic of kind of like Oz, there's this magic, whether it's in front of or behind the scenes or behind the curtain. And it's that bridge of storytelling is so universal. You look at life, you look at love, you look at politics and relationships and life so differently, no matter what age you are. And it's that bridge that the storytelling has of keeping those questions moving and circulating. And so my question to you all is, when you've performed and done any type of work and someone has said to you, you made me look at life or love differently, how has that touched you?
It's always, thank you for the question. And it always is deeply emotional because it's unexpected. I've said this before. It's not why we do it. It is why it's valuable, but it's not why we do it. We do it because we love it. And to then have, and this transcends theater, television. I mean, I've had people who, in extreme situations, had seen the television show that I was on and just thanked me for everyone on the show, for being able to laugh through a tragedy or whatever it was. And I think, yeah, it is a great gift. We all love to get laughs, and we love to get applause and standing ovations and stuff like that, but something so deeply personal we don't get usually, because the way we've been trained, our work goes this way. And we absorb you as we're doing that. You come in our ears this way. And our work has gone out that way. And so to have that face-to-face communication in an autograph line, in a moment of signing an autograph, it is a two-way street. It's not just being generous. Thank you for the compliment, but it's a chance to say, oh, we all did this. We did this together.
Yeah, we are going to have to wrap this up. I want to say one thing, and then I want to ask Dwayne something, or ask each of you. One of the things that this whole conversation started to make me think about is that we are very focused today, I think, on looking at our differences, looking at, all the things that make individual people different from each other. And I think there's a lot of beauty in that in terms of, more understanding of what separates us from each other. But what I think theater is about is what makes us the same. And I think we need to find that balance of exploring our differences so we can understand what makes us the same. Because we need each other. We need to be less divisive. And I grew up a little bit differently, I think, in the kind of family I grew up with. I grew up in Manhattan where everyone was different from each other. But it was really about what made us the same. So that's something you've just made me think about more today. I do want to ask Dwayne if you have any last thoughts. He is often my wise older brother, and that I go to for advice and for help. Is there anything just today that this has made you think about?
I was thinking, going back to the writer aspect, and I guess the thing that came to my mind is that writers are the purveyors of the human spirit. You bring in, through your words, what we are, and then we reinterpret it for others to share and to see and to grow from.
Any other last kind of things? No?
Not after that.
Anyone else? Okay. Well, listen, we probably could sit here talking for the rest of the night, but we're not going to do that to you. And I really thank you. This is something we need. I think we need to talk more to each other. And I think we as artists need to know more about what we have to ask these questions. Why do we do this? So we can do it better, and so that we can also keep it alive. And because we believe in it, but we want it to have value to you also. If we do it alone in our room, that's great. But it's how does it impact the people in the room? And I love that someone brought up this word, imagination. That everything, we get so much denotative information on screen, but the theater, we have to imagine it, and something different happens. Anyway, thank you for doing all this with us today. We are, applause for all of you and all of us. And please, if you don't already support your local theater, please do that however you can, whether that be just to buy a ticket and go see it. So thank you for coming today, and what I always say is to be continued. Okay, so thank you. Okay.